JRPG.
Hi, I'm Ross. I'm the community manager, PR person, and one of the testers over at Ghostlight, a publisher of Japanese games. Originally, we mainly published Japanese games on console in Europe, but over the last few years, we've started porting quite a few to Steam as well, and releasing them worldwide, or often worldwide, excluding Japan.
Well, that it leads me sort of straight into a question, which is how do you think the rise of digital distribution has affected how we get these sort of niche titles in the West?
It's, in many ways, from a publisher's perspective, made it a lot easier. First of all, there's a lot less risk in picking up a title. If you're releasing a game physically, first of all, you've got to rely on stores actually wanting to stock the title, which has been an issue with some surprisingly decent, reasonably big names in the past, particularly in Europe.
That's a very recent example in Australia is the Galgun got pulled from all store shelves. It was only up for a day before they all pulled it from shelves, so that's it's pretty shocking, really.
We had not really similar, but we had a problem with Devil Survivor 2, just because it was very late in the original DS's lifespan that it came over to Europe. So no stores really had shelf space for DS games. In the end, we managed to get it out, but just barely, and we had to sort of do a pre-order scheme on our website for people to get the game, because we just couldn't. Because the other thing is that physical games have a minimum print run. It varies depending on which console manufacturer you're going with, but so if you're not getting enough orders you can often find yourself in a situation where just printing the game will lose you money just on that.
Yep.
Which was the issue with Devil Survivor 2 and why we ran that pre-order scheme, because we needed to hit a certain number of pre-orders before we'd just break even on printing it. And then obviously you've got just the additional costs of manufacturing stock, keeping it in a warehouse, or offering someone a cut so they sort of handle that, distributing. It makes sort of worldwide releases a lot easier digitally, because rather than having to deal with distributors in each country, which we tended to have lots of distributors throughout the various European countries. We'd probably have someone in Australia and covering Australia and New Zealand, so we'd have to get deals in place for all of these. Whereas if it's digitally distributed, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about minimum print runs. You don't have to worry about our stores going to think people are interested in it. You can get it out on the digital storefront,
and people can decide for themselves.
Yeah.
Do you think that if digital distribution and maybe platforms like Steam were sort of advanced as they are now, maybe like 10 or so years ago, that we would have seen more JRPGs in the West? Or do you think that sort of that genre had to grow in popularity sort of regardless of distribution?
I think it would have probably seen more niche titles simply because there's less risk. But I think one of the main issues was that a lot of Japanese gamers have moved over to handheld, whereas in the West that wasn't so much of a thing. So you've sort of got some disconnect between what people want to play games on in the West as opposed to what people were playing games on in Japan. And to an extent, that's still there to an extent, but digital distribution makes it a bit easier to take risks on niche games. And also with Steam, one of the things we're doing is porting games to PC, where it's not so much of an issue what the original platform was in Japan. obviously this will vary on a game-by-game basis, and so far we've only actually had to translate one game ourselves to release on Steam, ELMINAGE GOTHIC. All the others we're using pre-existing localizations.
Yep.
I mean, the longest one we've had was probably Way of a Samurai 4, and that took probably around about a year. And that was just had a few, lots of technical issues. Usually, it can take as little as sort of 3 months, possibly. The first stage, obviously, is we have to get the game, and that's sort of before. And what usually happens, the one complication for PC is that we really need a copy of the source code before we're prepared to sign anything, because we need to see how easy it's going to be to port. Which is a bit unusual, because in most cases, back in the console days, while there were 1 or 2 exceptions, usually the port would be done in Japan. So it wasn't so much of an issue how long, you didn't really need to see the source code, because the guys in Japan were going to handle that part, and you'd just be testing the builds they sent you. But since we do the port ourselves, we need to have a good idea how long it's going to take. And I mean, that can take a while, because a lot of Japanese companies aren't particularly keen to let their source code out, just because it's something they worked on, and they need to know you're not going to sort of steal it and
use it for your own means. Yeah.
yeah. So you need to have built a level of trust before anyone's going to give you their source code. Once we've done that, assuming the source code looks like it's not going to be too bad a job, and we agree a deal and work out if we're going to be allowed to release it in Japan or not, and what the cost will be, royalties and things like that, and an approval scheme, then we'll start work, and the coders will create the sort of first work on getting a first playable. This won't be very good, but it'll be, you can play it, you can control things, and you can at least get into the game, even if you can't get very far. And this usually takes, 1 or 2 months. 2 months, probably, I'd say, more often than not. Sometimes a bit longer. Depends how familiar we are with that particular game company's source code. We've done an awful lot of Idea Factory ports at this point, so those ones tend to be a bit quicker for us, because
they all seem to run on very similar engines.
They are, and we're just our coders very familiar with them, but it's usually not too bad at this point. And then once you've got that first playable, it's all about looking at it and ironing out bugs, making sure you can actually complete it, but also working out graphical issues. At the same time, someone will have been looking at the console version to just so we know how we're going to have to adapt the control scheme to PC, if there's any things that could trip us up, and just how it's supposed to run on console. And we'll have also come up with a sort of suggested control scheme, although this is often subject to change depending how it works in the testing phase. And then once we've got this, and this period is the period that varies the most. Sometimes it takes them just about a month. Sometimes, but in Way of a Samurai's case, it probably took about 4's case, it probably took sort of 7 months or something. So it really can vary. But once we've got to a place where it looks reasonably solid, even if it's not there yet, we start bringing beta testers in. I mean, this is the great thing about Steam. You can sort of send codes to people, and you don't have to organise physical versions or send people individual builds. You can just send them a Steam code, and they can start looking at the game. And
they get the updates automatically. And
so it's so much. So you couldn't do that you couldn't have done that pre-Steam, really. And obviously, it's quite important for PC, because unlike console, where it's one set thing and you know exactly what you're dealing with, PCs can be almost anything. They've got thousands of different combinations, bits not working on some, old drivers. But we generally give out about 100 codes. So that's, quite a few different setups. People playing it on. I mean, they're also, the beta testers tend to be pretty good, and they'll also come up with more standard bugs that aren't necessarily related to their system, or sometimes suggestions as well. Control scheme suggestions are one thing we get a lot of.
Yeah, I found the Mugen Sol Z keyboard and mouse control scheme to be incredibly easy to use. I didn't actually use a controller for the first couple of hours. I just found it great. Which is not something I usually expect from a console to PC port.
It's a lot of because we've already released Mugen Souls and we've had a lot of feedback from beta testers and the Mugen Souls release. We sort of, had a pretty strong idea of where we wanted to go with this and what people wanted from it, and just come up with something that's fairly intuitive. Because that's all you want from a control scheme. That you can do what you want to do as easily as
it makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. You're not thinking around what key does this. Oh, it's over. They've assigned the N key to this or what have you. It's try and come up with something that makes sense. It's fairly consistent. It's comfortable and just intuitive. So the beta testers tend to be really helpful for that as well. Because obviously you're giving it to 100 people. Some of them will just play on controller, but plenty of them will want to try mouse and keyboard. And you're getting far more feedback than we could do just in-house.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, obviously, before you get to the betas, you want it in a state they can play it. Because as with anything, people are most enthusiastic pretty much at the start. So you want a version they can get somewhere with. You don't want to waste that enthusiasm on a version that crashes all the time, has horrific, obvious bugs that they're just not going to be able to see past. So you've got to get it into some sort of shape there, because if not, you're probably going to have to add more people as the beta goes along just to keep that sort of level of enthusiasm up.
Yeah, sure. That's definitely understandable. And something I wouldn't have thought of, actually. I mean, you obviously want it in a playable state, but to think of it as most people will go in very enthusiastic, and if they play something that's a bit broken, they sort of lose all that enthusiasm.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're going into a beta, you're expecting some stuff to be wrong, but there's
a difference between an alpha and a beta.
Yeah, and I mean, and also if there's lots of really obvious stuff broken, obviously that's going to be reported a lot, and you'll get some smaller issues, but still important ones, sort of hidden because there's just this great big massive bug that no one can look past. Obviously that happens in the office to an extent, but we know we need to keep going on it, and we're there, so yeah. And then the beta, there is Way of the Samurai 4 had quite a long one. Sometimes it's only a few weeks. It's sort of what state is the game in, how easy is it to fix the problems that are noticed. And we tend to release very quickly after we know the game's kind of working. But usually be, say, we got the game working, and most of the bugs are squashed, and it's at a level we're happy to release. And then, sort of, usually a week after that, we'll announce release date for about a week after. So it usually happens quite close to the game being ready, but it's actually out in front of people. A bit of both. Obviously, at the start, we were pitching it to them because it wasn't really something anyone had done before. So, I mean, there've been Japanese games brought to PC, but they tended to be either ones that were originally made on PC, or something like The Last Remnant from Square Enix, where it was being done, by a Japanese publisher that had a Western arm being released on Steam. There wasn't much where, I don't know if there's anything where a sort of Western publisher had gone to a Japanese company and said, we'd like to port your game to PC.
Yeah, I can't think of one personally.
Yeah, I mean, on the indie front, there's Racketeer, but that was originally a PC game. The Nihon Falcon games were by XE were about the same time, but again, they were originally PC games. So yeah, I can't think of any. So we were one of the first. So at first, we had to go and sell the Japanese on the idea, and we already had a very good relationship with Idea Factory. We'd published all the AGAREST games in Europe before that on console, so we had a good relationship with them, so we were able to pitch the idea to them, and they agreed to let us release the original AGAREST. Since then, it's been more of a mixed bag. We'll still go to people and ask them, is this game available? But we also get more offers, games offered to us, either through our agents or, I think generally through our agents. I'm not hugely involved in that side of things, so I'm not quite sure of the mechanics, but we do get quite a few games offered to us. We do still sometimes suggest games that we'd like to do and see if they're available. And also sometimes we're asked to port games to PC for other companies, because we've done quite a few now. In general, our ports seem to be pretty well received. It tends to be I like to think they're pretty solid. And so sometimes Japanese publishers who want to publish their games on PC will come to us and say, we'd like to publish this. We want you to develop the port for us. We've done one of those in the past, and we're actually working on another one for someone else at the moment. So,
okay, yeah, well, yeah, that's I guess them coming to you sort of came with the reputation then.
Yeah, and also, I think Japanese games in general have been reasonably successful on Steam, so it's a much easier thing to get people to offer you their games if they've seen other ones doing pretty well.
Sure.
On Steam.
So, are there any games that you wanted to bring over but couldn't or haven't been able to? Like, was there one particular game that you really wanted to but just couldn't?
I mean, I'd say largely because there's sort of NDAs involved, and so we can't really go into too many discussions. I mean, I think it's no secret that we'd still love to, and maybe one day it will happen, but, you know, we did quite a bit with Atlas on console, and if the opportunity was ever there, I can't speak for the company.
Sure.
But I'd personally love to do something Atlas related.
Back in the PlayStation 2 era, going back here, that you guys got Shin Megami Tensei 3 and both digital Devil Saga games, but didn't get Devil Summoner 1 and 2 for some reason.
I mean, this was all a bit before my time. I joined just before Digital Devil Saga 2 was released, but by then all the work had been done on it.
Sure.
So I don't really know what happened there, but I mean, the thing about the Atlas games is each game was agreed on a game-by-game basis. So if someone else was into it, in for it, or for whatever reason the deal wasn't there, an agreement could be arranged, then, you know, we didn't get them.
Sure.
It was very much all deal. So that's why the Atlas games sort of spread between several different publishers, and some didn't make it over here. Just the nature of the way their arrangements worked.
So what is your favourite game that you guys have brought over so far?
My personal favourite, and pretty much anyone who's followed me on Twitter can probably guess this one, was on PSP. It was the original Trails in the Sky game.
Oh, what a great game. Absolutely brilliant.
I loved that. It was fantastic. I mean, I kind of look at the European releases being a bit my baby, because I remember I was one who suggested we look into it after seeing quite a few people, Americans on Twitter, talking about it. And I basically said to my boss, yeah, I really want to play this. Can we get a copy over to look at? We got an evaluation copy about a week later. I started the evaluation. I then ended up borrowing the work PSP and the game and taking it home with me. And basically, until I finished it, I'd already given my evaluation in at this point. This was just me playing it. And then when it came in, I did most of the testing on it as well. At that point, I'd started doing the PR and community management, so I was doing that for it. And then when it was finished and we got the stock in, I actually was down in the warehouse helping ship it out.
Yeah, so there you go. So that is a little bit of your baby then.
Yes. I mean, obviously, I wasn't quite as involved as anyone in Japan or the Exceed's translation team, who I believe, put in a truly heroic effort on that one, by the sounds of things.
Absolutely. All right, so that's your favorite game that you've brought over. What is your favorite, or just a couple of your favorite games in general, maybe that you guys haven't brought over?
Favorite games in general? I mean, I love the Persona series. And we actually did P3P, so I know that's cheating a little.
Yeah, that's fine.
The Persona series is fantastic.
Absolutely.
I've really been enjoying, over the last few years, a lot of the Paradox Grand Strategy games. So Europa Universalis, Crusader Kings 2, and recently Stellaris. Hugely complicated, but I really got into them. He's left now and gone to uni, but there used to be a guy at work I'd play, and we'd basically have our lunchtime game would either be Crusader Kings or EU4. So I've put a lot of time into those games. I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about sort of the history of Japanese games coming to PC, but Racketeer was a lot of fun, I thought.
Yeah, it's something that I haven't played, actually.
It was really cool. You're sort of, you're running an item shop in an RPG world. At the same time, you're going on adventures to get items.
Well, yeah, that sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I've kind of got an on and off addiction to Football Manager.
Right. Yep. We all have our little game that we always go back to, don't we?
Yes, I've been basically I haven't bought everyone, but I've been playing them since I think 1993. So, yes,
absolutely.
To be honest, I kept telling myself that would be the game I'd get a Wii U for. And then it sort of came so late in its lifetime that I was like,
Maybe when they hit the bargain bins.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'd still quite like a Wii U. There's plenty of games I'd like to play. It's just time and time.
Exactly, time.
I've got a stupidly massive backlog of games, so...
Oh, don't we all?
Yes.
Especially the JRPG gamer, it just seems like, the normal type of, or the more popular AAA game will be sort of like release, and then they get like 4 months to play that release, and then they can play that one, and then they get another 4 months, and then for us it's just sort of like, oh, there's 3 games being released just this month, and then in 2 weeks' time there's another 7.
Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah, still meaning to try Disgaea on PC. I've bought it. I'm meaning to get to it. I just been playing other stuff.
Yep.
And it's like, I really want to play Disgaea because I missed it the first time round. And I've heard so much about how awesome it is. And I'm like, I will play it sometime. I promise. It's just, it's just getting time.
Of course, yes. We all have that issue. Where do you see the future of JRPGs? Like, do you see more Steam releases, and do you see more, because I've noticed more recently we sort of get less work intensive localizations, if that makes sense. So we sort of just get the Japanese game with just English subtitles and that's it, without doing voiceovers. And do you think that that's where we'll continue going, or is there still sort of a large enough market to justify full localizations?
In regards to Steam releases, I think they're here to stay, or at least for the foreseeable future. It's been, certainly for us, they've done very well, and I get the impression that a lot of other companies are reasonably happy with how they've done. I know there's a few ones I'm really looking forward to. The third Trails game, which should be coming sometime. I'm not sure when Exceed said they're doing that, but it'll be coming sometime, and I really want to play that because I love the first two. And there's quite a few others that are on their way to PC. So I think that's here to stay for the foreseeable future. Voice acting, it depends, I think. I mean, obviously, with more niche stuff coming over, there's going to be a limited amount that get... there's going to be more, but a bit too niche to get the full voice acting. But then voice acting's quite complex thing because a lot of it is contractual. Often there have been games where the Japanese company will only have the rights to the Japanese voice acting for certain uses, certain platforms, certain uses. I mean, sometimes games have been localized without that because they just don't have the rights to it.
Okay, that's interesting.
And we've actually run in. I probably can't say which game, but I believe there are games that there's something we've done on Steam, which for reason it wasn't allowed to come. We weren't allowed to release it in Japan. Was a voice acting related one.
So some of those, you're sort of saying that some games might have to be English voiceover, like done English voiceovers because they can't use the Japanese voiceovers in imported versions and stuff like that.
Yes, or it costs a lot to license them, or you have to go round various people because the rights are in different places. So it might be. I mean, this is an area I'm not involved in at all. I'm just going on what I've heard other companies say largely.
Yeah, sure.
But so I'm no expert on this bit. But yeah, it will be. It partly depends on the licenses involved. I mean, some of it is platform. Vita hasn't. I mean, I don't think it's any secret that Vita hasn't done brilliantly in the West.
Yeah, that's true.
And there's also opportunity cost in that the bigger company is, the more other things they could do with the resources they use to this. So if you're a big company, it's why historically quite a few decent-sized, reasonably popular JRPGs that were with big companies didn't come over, where something a bit smaller might be brought over by a Western publisher, is that just the opportunity that a big company, whether it's Square Enix or someone else, could have more things they could do with the resources to bring out that would be used to bring over that game, which would possibly earn them more money. Whereas for the sort of smaller specialist publisher of JRPGs, there's bring over JRPG X or bring over JRPG Y.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
Not quite the, or we could do this or that or this.
Yeah, there's not quite the they're all their choices are ultimately the same thing. Whereas somebody like Square Enix could put their cash flow into a million different ideas, couldn't they?
It varies. I mean, we'll often have sort of a couple, I think, although generally at different stages, so they're not interfering with each other too much. But sometimes it's just one, sometimes it's a couple. But obviously, it depends. I mean, when we were translating ELMINAGE, for example, the translation work on ELMINAGE wasn't interfering too much with other things. So yeah, it depends sort of how much we can fit and make sure everyone's got things to do, but at the same time not overcrowding anyone's schedule so it doesn't slow the whole batch down.
Yeah, sure. Alright, and the final thing, which I know I'm probably not going to get any sort of answer to because of NDAs and all that kind of stuff, but is there anything you guys are working on right now that you can share?
I was actually sent I mean, I mentioned briefly we're working on something for someone else at the moment. Can't go into any details on that because it's not. We're not publishing it, so it's someone else's thing. But we've also got a lot of. I was sent recently a big list of games we're looking at and going to try and pick up. It's quite a nice list and there's some impressive names on that, but obviously I can't. I mean, there's a few JRPGs, some Japanese action games, some of which are very, very exciting, some which would fit more within what you might expect for us, and some are bigger than you'd expect for us, but it depends on what deals we can agree, so we'll have to wait and see on that. There's one in particular I'm really crossing my fingers for, but I don't know if that will happen, so...
Well, that certainly sounds exciting. And, I will definitely keep my eyes and ears out for any of those announcements coming.
You can... If you're interested, you can check us out on our site, ghostlight.uk.com. We've also got a Twitter account, Ghostlight_Games. That is right, isn't it? It could be.
I think that's right. I'm sure if they search Ghostlight, it'll be the first thing that comes up.
It's. I got it wrong. There's no underscore, but it's just Ghostlight Games.
Right.
I can't believe I got that wrong. I've typed it out about 10 billion times now. And there's also, if you want to see what I am doing, I've also got a Twitter account, Ghostlight_Ross. We also have done some games in-house. And if you want to check them out, Flame Over, which is a firefighting action roguelike, and OMG Zombies, which is a sort of chain reaction shooting puzzle game. So if you'd like to check out what we do ourselves, then take a look at them.
Well, that sounds absolutely great. I will definitely be checking those out after this. It has been a pleasure, Ross. I hope I haven't taken up too much of your afternoon.
No, thanks for having me on.